Welcome to Charts This Week. My name's David Linton. I run Updata, and this week's edition comes to you from London for Monday, the 7th of March. And crude had a good week last week, much as we expected. We said that once it broke the 36 level, we felt this would be a break out of this triangle pattern, and it has started to run a bit, and we're now nudging the 40 mark on Brent, which is great. Of course, we are still below the cloud on the lagging line. We're through on the price, so that is a little bit more encouraging on the price, but we can go all the way to $43 before we would be breaking out in this trend. And of course we did it last year, and it was pretty short-lived. We saw last year that a bit later in April we did move out, and we did get back to the 65 level, which we can only dream of now, of course. But the key thing is that any recovery in the price we expect to be fairly short-lived, and we have been saying for the last several weeks that we thought that crude would have a strong few weeks ahead of it because of the seasonality. But we see here with the seasonality that starts to flatten and then fall away again in the second half of the year. So this is 2016. This is a 10-year weighted seasonality. You can do that in your Updata menu under the seasonality function here, and basically that's showing that, taking the last 10 years of price movement into account, this is how we would expect the year in crude to look, weighted towards the previous years. So it does suggest that any move in crude in the medium term will be fairly short-lived. But at the moment, we are seeing a bit of recovery in the price. We see the breakout here, that 36 level on Brent. This is the cloud, so we're bullish while we're above the cloud. Shift T on your Updata system will give you the trends and targets. We do have a new upside target to 44.55. That's 13% more upside, but we need to break above this 39.50. We've just pulled back below that, so we need to really break above that. But if we get above 39.50 or 40, then we could see another 10% move in the price. And if we look at WTI, much the same story there. Bullish above the cloud. Shift T gives you the trends and targets. All these upside targets were given. We were talking about these a week ago. All given and met. We do have a new upside target to about $40, but we need a new high there as well. So quite key. And of course, if you're trading crude short term, the 1 minute point and figure chart, this data all coming from Thomson Reuters Icon. The 1 minute chart's giving us a bit of a heads up, is saying that there's a 41.80 target there on Brent. So this week might well be the week that we break back above $40, and that will be newsworthy. If we look at NatGas, Updata clients had a report last week on NatGas, and we're pretty bearish since we've fallen below this level. This is the rollover adjusted chart, of course, but we are making new lows here on NatGas. The seasonality is such that we do expect a little bit of recovery in the price. Take a look at on the Updata website under research. Take a look at Brent Berarducci's reports this week on NatGas injection. Really interesting, and not a lot there in the fundamentals supporting the price according to that analysis. So what's interesting here is maybe we'll go sideways, but then we come into the second half of the year where prices fall very heavily. So really interesting to see that. Bearish below the cloud here. This is on the 60-minute chart. Just bearish. So any recovery in the price hits resistance and keeps making new lows. So we're in the low 160s at the moment, but that's what's key there is that move below the cloud. Shift T, we'll put the trends and targets on, and we see here that we've got downside targets of 7%. So that's pretty worrying for the price. If we take a look at the 1 minute chart, of course this is really, if you're trading Henry Hub, 151 is that downside target on the 1 minute chart. So we've said in the report 150s, and we even gave a really scary target, which you need to read the report to see. But US NatGas not looking great. If we look at European energy markets, we see here MBP, TTF all down this morning by about 0.5%. This is, remember, real-time OTC consolidated broker data coming in from the Updata energy feed, or off your Trayport system if you're connected to Trayport. Report. So we see here that we're nudging along the floor, but bearish on the 60-minute chart. Shift T on that chart. Downside targets 26.90, 26.25, and if we look at the 1-minute chart, again this is real-time consolidated OTC broker data, Shift T, and we have targets of 26.45, 26.25. That's looking quite likely. If you're trading that MBP or any European gas products OTC, you really need those targets to keep a watch on where things are going. Keep an eye on our morning call reports as well. Here we see the 60-minute chart, really quite key here, back below the cloud, so that's bearish. So not a great looking week for gas. TTF 11.15, 10.95, 11.43. So really quite worrying there. And Gaspool making new lows as well, so that's pretty worrying for the price too. If we look at European power, we see here that German power is just recovering off that bottom, so looking reasonable here, but of course well below the cloud. We are above the cloud on the 60-minute chart, so we are just wandering above here. Notice how these moves are all quite short-lived. So you see here sideways, move down sideways. So Shift T will give you the trends and targets. Upside targets here 22.90, 22.20, so we are seeing some potential. And again, the 1-minute chart, if you're trading German power, this is essential. Real-time consolidated broker data, either off your Trayport screen or the Updata energy feed. And we see here we have got upside targets to about 22.20. So not a lot to play for at the moment, but power looking a little bit better than gas this week. Nordic power still just the cloud bearing down. And if we look at the quarterly contract, we are above the chart here on the cloud on the 60-minute chart. Do have about 10% upside here to play for. So Nordic power looking a little bit better. Overall power looking a little bit better than gas in the week. If we look at currencies, all these forex rates coming off your Thomson Reuters icon, of course. The ability to marry that data with your Trayport data are really valuable. Here we see the dollar index. We're below on the cloud here. So that's still bearish on the dollar. Although it has to be said, if we look at this chart, we are in this big sideways range. Any move soon and we could be starting to see the dollar rise. Long term, we're still pretty bullish on the dollar and bearish on the euro. Here we see the 60-minute chart. We're just below the cloud here. Shift T again will give us a heads up. We do have these downside targets and this downward pressure. We do have a new thrust target here on the dollar as well. So really trading a bit on a knife edge there. Euro just holding the bullish trend. We did come right back into cloud support. So the euro is just holding that bullish trend. But if we look at the 60-minute chart, we see that that's the recovery that we saw towards the end of last week in the euro against the dollar. Shift T. But we do still have all these downside targets hanging over us, 106, 106.70, 107.70. So at the moment, the picture is pretty mixed. And of course, if you're watching the currencies short term, the 1-minute chart, Shift T, and we see here 106.10. We do have a couple of upside targets of 112. So could go literally about 3 or 4 cents either way at the moment. So really quite interesting that. Keep an eye on the short-term charts. If we look at sterling did recover last week, but falling off again this morning. But we're bullish above the cloud at the moment for sterling. But again, with that downtrend on the daily cloud, big moves down, small recoveries, big moves down. And if we put Shift T on there, we do have an upside target to 144.40 at the moment. We are just pulling back here, so quite interesting that chart as well. Norwegian kroner is about 9.30, just strengthened a bit there against the euro, and here the Swiss recovering a little bit as well. And if we look at sterling Swiss, recovering off that low of 138 back to 141. So sterling had a little bit better end to the week. If we look at stock markets, we start with the S&P 500. Interestingly, the S&P 500 closed at 1999.99, so it just failed by zero point 0.1 of a point to break above that 2000 level. So what does that mean for the market? Quite interesting. If we look at the weekly chart, here we see we're just struggling to get back above the cloud there, where we've come back into the cloud, but we've come back in from below, so we're still bearish in the long term, having had made this transition. This price fan really opening out here, so wouldn't take a lot for the market to turn bullish again, but at the moment this is the lower low, and then the lower high and then the lower low, so this pattern is still pretty bearish, even though it does look like we're making a bit of recovery. Here we see the daily chart, below on the cloud on the lagging line, just through on the price, and above on the weekly. We've still got these down targets of about 25% hanging over us. Very strong support though, so very interesting to see that. And we do have upside potential targets of about 7% upside, so still looking pretty bullish in the short term, but it's quite interesting that the long-term picture is still remaining bearish. That 2000 level is pretty important. Will we close above it this week? That will be a very telling point for the US stock market. If we look at NASDAQ, much the same picture. Here we didn't actually go below on the lagging line, so the NASDAQ hasn't actually turned bearish, but again, we can't ignore that S&P chart. We are bearish still on the daily. We're not through on the price or the cloud. The S&P has actually done that, so NASDAQ's looking a little bit more bearish in the medium term, and we do still have upside targets here of about 11% on the medium term chart, but and 6% upside on the short term chart, but we are hitting resistance, so the market's giving a very, very mixed picture. If we look at the FTSE back below 6,200, just again couldn't break that 6,200 level, closed at 6,199 on Friday. It was down a bit this morning, and we're just struggling to get back above the cloud on the daily chart here on the lagging line, so that's quite interesting. We are bullish in the short term, but bearish in the bullish in the short term, bearish in the long term. Downside target still hanging over us, and we do have a new upside target of about 14.5%, and on the very short term chart 6%. So a mixed picture. Very much depends on how the US market spends the week. If we close lower the week, it looks like we've hit resistance and we're coming back. Here we see Xetra DAX, bearish on the weekly, bearish on the daily, bullish on the 60-minute chart, and again we see mixed targets here as well. Looking at Asia, Nikkei has had a very strong run recently in the recovery. We see that here in this chart and the jumps that we saw last week, but we are still bearish on the medium term. Do have upside targets now of about 14%, but downside targets too, so there's a lot of volatility in this market. Very hard to call, but the recovery is still underway. India, more and more updated clients in India, so we're very happy to comment on India. The Sensex, below the cloud on the weekly, still below on the daily, is moving quite strongly on the 60-minute chart, so we are seeing some movement there. And last of all, we take a look at the Aussie market. Aussie market looking quite strong, and that's quite interesting. The resources recovery has helped here as well, but we're still bearish on the weekly, bearish on the daily, and just bullish on the 60-minute. Last of all, take a look at gold. We put out a gold report this morning to clients. Take a look at the gold chart. Really interesting what's happening there on the gold. That's it for this week. Until next week, happy charting. See you then.